Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the No Limit Selling Podcast. And today we have Thomas Ross, the Vice President of Sales at Workplace AI. Thomas, welcome to the program.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Some of the most disdained people on planet Earth are salespeople, which is a paradox to me because nothing happens unless you sell something. And we knew that when we were like 2 years old, we had the ability to figure out which parent was the weakest link in this category. And we did whatever it took to close that sale. And let me tell you, if you're like a 42-year-old man and you're up against a 2-year-old daughter, toddler, you don't stand a chance. She's a way better salesperson.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. Yes, but go
So we
ahead.
go from that ability to be such great salespeople, and going back to that initial comment of there is not going to be a new cure for cancer unless a scientist can basically make the case for you need to research, fund this research. When we're writing a book, we need to convince a publisher. Everything in this world moves forward with salespeople. So why do you think it is that we still have this sense that salespeople are out to get us?
Right. Well, sure. I mean, at the end of the day, we know that in most cases, the objective of most salespeople to date has been to close the sale and get us buy something. And we always have the outlook that we're not here to buy anything. We're just
Right.
ask questions like walking into a retail store, and that salesperson lunges on you, and the first thing you say is, "I'm just looking."
Absolutely. And even though we need help getting what we want, so that is a very human equation, and it's a human
Mhm.
to human equation.
Sure.
But now with AI coming up, I wonder if that equation changes. And I'll give you a data point before I let you answer that question. What they found is for soldiers talking to therapists, there is a certain level of distrust there. But they find that when they're talking to a computer about the same issues, they can be a lot more open about it because they don't feel judged. So it changes the equation of therapy, which is a more intimate act. I wonder if AI is going to change the relationship of the person that's potentially buying and the salesperson who isn't a human anymore, or does it remain the same?
I think that's a very strong possibility, and I think given that new AI generated images and individuals are now being created in order to facilitate the sales process, even further than chatbots are yet today,
Hmm.
is going to in fact take that characteristic in. But I would also say that in general, in the past, where people were skeptical of sales initiatives, right? AI changes all of that because people have changed the way they look for things. So now they can get much more information online than they ever could before, and they can engage with that AI component immediately, right? And in a lot of ways, bypass that initial sales process with a salesperson.
So I see. So I'll give you a data point. I was reading a Tom Clancy book, and they're trying to negotiate this major denuclearization treaty with Russia. And our hero, Jack Ryan, is lower down the pecking order, and he meets his counterpart at a bar, and they're just chit chatting outside of the conference and the negotiations. And they have this conversation. It's like, so, what do you think is going to happen? We're going to ask for this. They're going to ask for that. We're going to contest this. We're going to contest that. In 2 years, we'll settle at this point. And they both agree that that's going to be the end result. But we have to go through the motions. I wonder if AI is going to get to a place where I'm going to have an AI as a buyer, and you're going to have an AI as a seller, and they just get down to the brass tacks. What's the best solution? Do you think that'll ever be a vision of the world, or will it just be companies selling to humans?
I mean, it's hard to predict the way technology is going to continue. I expect that that would happen by way of the advance in technology, but I don't think people will go in that direction because I don't think people will necessarily, and I shouldn't use the word trust, but I will, trust the technology to give them what they're really looking for. In other words, they'll still want to touch and feel and ask the right questions and use their own human, intuitiveness to understand and to make sure that it's a good fit for them. But on the other side of the equation, AI can do most of that today.
Right. So now let's talk about the AI human equation. I guess we all go back to the Luddites, where they kind of attacked factories for the industrialization. You're stealing our jobs, and now AI is coming, and certainly it's. I think anybody that's using it, it's a gift in our lives. It really, really helps us understand things at a deeper level. But as this comes into sales organizations, uh, how's it being received? You have more contact with organizations that have AI coming in. How do organizations receive it? How do salespeople receive it? How do the customers of the organizations receive it?
Well, the customers are way ahead of the organizations. That's number one, right?
In what
And
way?
and it's not even close. Well, customers have been used to using technology for quite some time, whether it be chatbox, whether it be microsites, whether it be AI and all its various firms, in order to the research that they're already doing depending upon the type of product or solution they're looking for. It's the organizations that are behind the curves. And the same goes for salespeople. And it's the organizations that need to catch up with the customer, not the other way around. Customers are already doing all these things. It's us as sellers and as organizations that need to catch up.
So let's back up a bit. So I'm a customer. Like the other day, it was actually after your presentation talking about AI. Uh, about 15 minutes later, I got a call from an AI, an audio call. She was like amazing, but she was like so amazing that when she asked me a question, I had to go abracadabra. And she goes, "Oh, I didn't quite get that." Then I go abracadabra. And then that's when I knew that I was talking to an AI. Had we not seen your presentation, I would not have been aware enough to go, wait a minute, because she was like spectacular. You could not tell it was a machine, but it was just the chipperness and being like a Disney character that kind of gave it away.
Mhm.
So, how are consumers going to react to that kind of lead generation? Like, is there any data out there right now?
Well, again, that's already happening. And there is data out there now to support that. So those kinds of things are already happening.
So, what
Um,
is the data to support lead generation? Like, how is AI faring versus humans?
Well, again, it depends upon the methodology with respect to that lead generation. So, lead generation, even when it comes to AI, is best done with direct engagement where most customers are today, which is online, social media, digital assets, websites, as they do their research. That's where most people are. Most people, whether it be AI or otherwise, are not answering this thing.
Right.
Right? And in addition, most people are not responding necessarily in the same way they used to cold emails, right?
Yeah. I was talking to Jeb Blouts, Sales Gravy. Like he's like one
Sure.
of the leaders in this space, and he says, "Hey, they've been noticing that since these AI cold email AIs have come out, that senior sales executives aren't answering their emails anymore. It's kill that medium coming into them. The phone apparently still does work, still hard to get a hold of them, and but he's saying that's what he finds is get on the phone and call them. That's the only way to get in right now, other than using social media in some way which is like tangential. uh, the cheapest way to get a hold of someone is pick up the phone and call them.
I'm going to disagree with just about all of that. So picking up the phone has been losing momentum for quite some time.
Agreed.
And certainly AI is probably the last nail on the head. Although telemarketers, I would argue, killed it long before AI showed up. So if we don't know the number, the odds of our picking that up, whether Jeff Blunt or anybody else suggests so, is very remote.
So
So
so let me kind of push back a little bit.
sure,
I've got a coaching client. That's his job is lead generation, and
sure,
so he's saying out of a hundred calls, he's going to land one or two appointments. Like that's still
okay.
happening in the real world, which is still daunting odds. I agree.
Right.
Out of the
Right.
100 calls, maybe 20 people pick up. And out of the 20 people that pick up, he gets one or two to set an appointment.
Well, those are amazing numbers because those aren't the numbers that are actually being produced. Whether you look at research that's being done or whether you look at real people doing it, the numbers are actually far, far lower than that. So I doubt that anybody's getting 2 appointments out of 100 cold calls. Now, when it comes to warm calls, and those are calls that have been pre-set up because you've connected with them on LinkedIn or they've been watching your content here or there, those warm calls are back to where cold calls used to be, right? Where you were getting a 30% pickup or a 40% pickup and converting lots better. So it's not that lead generation isn't critical, it's the methodology that we use to accomplish that. And AI at the front of that can be helpful in that it can help us create that content as well as the reach out on those social channels where we can begin the process.
So let's talk about that warm connection. By warm connection, do you mean that I'm connected on LinkedIn with you? Maybe we've got a conversation or two happening on LinkedIn. Then I set the appointment, or we've got a conversation. I happen to call you. Like, what do you mean by that warm connection?
So the process is a little different in that it might be front ended with the engagement on a LinkedIn or a social channel, one kind or another.
Hmm.
It could be Facebook, it could be Twitter, now known as X, of course. But any one of those, LinkedIn is probably a good as good example as any. Whereas I connect to somebody on LinkedIn, they've been reading my content, or I've been reading and engaging with some of their content. They connect with me. I immediately send them an email, and in that case that's not a cold email because they're going to recognize it
Hmm.
from the conversion, and or I convert them into a new contact on my Facebook group page or any of the other digital media that I use. Now I've created that connection, and if I've got their number through that process, I will have SMSed them. In addition to that, now I can call them. They're going to recognize the number, and I may have that conversation with they, or long before then, I may have booked them into a Zoom call through
Right.
one of the engagements that I created and the other methods that we just spoke about.
So, would you recommend if you're on LinkedIn and then I drop you an email that what I would do is in on LinkedIn say, uh, "Hey Thomas, I just dropped you an email with this stuff. You'll find it in your inbox." Just as an added way that hey, connect the two dots.
100%. And in addition to that, I would connect them to other social media channels that you're working with and developing, because it's important to be multi channel and to use a number of channels and not one.
Right. So I like the idea of Facebook groups
Yes,
because that's a nice way that they're self selecting in, and if you can provide good content that's valuable to them, that's actionable to them, that starts building that relationship. So when you do have that call or you do move forward, or more importantly, you could actually say on your group that, hey, I've got this new process happening. If you'd like to find out more about it, let's jump on a call for 15 minutes. Here's a link that they're self selecting in, would be a huge way to do that.
it can be. It can be. Now, let's just remember that there is no one size fits all.
Absolutely.
And every customer type, every product type, every solution type requires its own process to be developed on their behalf.
So for individual producers, and sometimes with an organization you are an individual as well, you can, you have to marshal your resources. So if you were starting out right now in a new company, Thomas, what would be the channels that you would set up? Would it certainly would be LinkedIn? What else would you be doing on a daily basis to
Well,
grow
I,
your
I,
network?
I do this already and every day, and I'm on all channels. So I'm on Twitter and X and Instagram and Facebook through a number of group pages. I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit through quite a number of direct profiles as well as group pages. So we use all of them, and we create the content that really focuses in our ICP or our ideal customer profile in
Right,
order to engage and develop those. And when I develop them, I take them off of LinkedIn because LinkedIn isn't a great place for people to engage to that next step. They don't
right.
like to do that there, but they will engage on a group page that's related to the topic at hand. So I pull them in there and we have conversations. and we develop the sales process from there.
So, pulling them into a group page, when would you pull them into a LinkedIn group page versus a Facebook?
It depends upon the nature of the topic and the individual. So if they're already in a LinkedIn group page and I can see that immediately, then I would continue therein. If they're not, or they're not very active, I'd probably pull them into a Facebook group page or pull them into another type of discussion that they're much more able to converse and more active in.
So, now bringing AI into an organization, you can bring it. So, let me take a step back. Are you familiar with Vistage?
I'm not. I think I know the name,
It's a peer
but I'm
advisory group.
okay.
It's
Yes,
where
I am.
a group of
Yes, I am.
CEOs kind of get together.
Yes, I
And
am.
one of the things you hear is for companies, it's like, oh God, Thomas has just come back from his Vistage group and he's got a new shiny object that he wants to play with this month. And so I could see organizations doing that with AI quite easily. So, how do you have a reasoned, strategic way of onboarding AI in a sales organization that doesn't blow up the past strategy immediately? Like, how do you bring it in a way that you get engagement and people actually buying into it? Because unless you get them to buy into it, it doesn't work. So, any thoughts on that? Can you give me a client story of how you helped them bring AI into the organization and it allowed everyone to be more successful, the salespeople as well as the organization?
Sure, and that's the best question you've asked so far. So that's the real trick. So everybody's bought AI. Everybody agrees AI is important. The problem is they bought the wrong thing for the wrong reasons, right? So they didn't determine what they wanted to do in the first place. Was it lead gen? Was it customer service? Was it just driving revenue? Was it more this, more that, more the other thing? We need to do that first and to align where they're short on their current process and look at AI as a solution to bridging that gap or to create an entirely new digital process if they don't currently have one. That said, yes, we've got many enterprise and many mid-sized clients that we've worked with to bring in and implement certain AI sales tools that make an incredible difference, both in terms of their cost of sales, because we get rid of a lot of the stuff that they bought that they're not using, and B, to get conversions and sales results much higher with their sales team through ongoing training, learning, implementation, and impact.
All right, so give me an example of a mid-sized client. Change the name so you can actually talk. This was a company. This is what they had. This was the challenges. This is what we did. This is how long it took to kind of bring it from a thought to actually implementation being used. That way, it would give a real-world example to the listeners of, oh, this is how it works.
Sure. And when we just finished one, and in fact, we're just finalizing some of the work with them. That's a mid-size telecommunications company. And they were simply using all the basic tools in the way that you described it, although they had a little bit of AI sprinkled here and there. They were doing phone calls and they were doing emails. And what we did is we put together a video sales process with some video tools that are AI based. And we created an AI based lead gen system tied in with group pages and with some of their other profiles. And we created an ongoing training system for their teams, both in customer service, inside sales, and their outside corporate sales team. And in so doing, we were able to cut down the number of outside salespeople that they needed because they didn't need as many when they're using this process. But they increased their inside salespeople, right? Because they needed more people to now support what was being developed than they did to develop it because it was more efficient. And they've so far in just 3 months seen a 47% increase in lead generation and a 20% increase in revenue generation. So that's an immediate result. And that's because digital is immediate, it isn't long. You cut your sales cycle usually down by at least half. You have to remember, most customers are already researching us. By
Right.
the time we or they have found us, they're already well into the process. Cold calls don't engage in that process. They're just throwing the dice.
All right, so go back to that real world example. What was the AI that they had sprinkled in their organization, and what products did you bring in for that specific case? And how did that actually? Uh, what was the learning curve of the salespeople? Was there any resistance? Like, how did you address the human equation to actually get it implemented?
Yeah, so in the case of some of the AI that was in place, they had a scattered group of little AI products that they had bought. Some of them were transcription tools.
Hmm.
Other ones were more video graphics that they were using on the marketing side, but none of it was connected. So they
Right.
were playing with this over here, they were playing with that over there, and they weren't getting any kind of cohesive result because they didn't have a strategy. So number one, we created the strategy. Number two, we connected or disconnected the AI they were using in order to bring in the right AI and the right sales tools in order to make it effective. Number three, we created an AI based ongoing digital training and mentoring system on the basis of the methodology that they wanted to use for their sales team so that every meeting their salespeople went in, they were being coached and they got better and they got better. And those who didn't move forward were able to discover very rapidly that they're not likely best suited for sales, and maybe they fell into the more of the customer service role. And we were able to really make their cost of sales drop while increasing those results. Because now using data rather than using a CRM, I can analyze that information coming in to the AI driven sales training process and see and get reports instantaneous in terms of how they're doing and where they can improve.
Brilliant. And what tools did you bring in?
We use SourceScribe as the main tool for training and implementing new sales skills and for creating the sales teams and creating the reporting that the leadership teams needed in order to see how effective it was. And that dropped their costs down by almost half in terms of all the other tools they were using.
Brilliant. So as these guys grow, how do you kind of keep an eye on that you're on the cutting edge of AI and the tools that you need? Like, what's a good way to do that? Is it like consultants like you are keeping an eye on the landscape, or should a company have an AI expert in house that's actually looking at what's out there? Like, what's the best way to stay current in this accelerated, ever changing market?
Sure, sure. And, it's a combination of all of those things. Some people are very, active and paying attention to what's going on with technology and what they should be doing. But most people are too busy in their day to day function of the business to be allotting that kind of time. So, usually working with somebody in house who's got that as part of their job description and working with a consultant in terms of technology, especially as it relates to the ongoing area of customer experience, because sales, marketing, and customer service don't exist anymore. Those are gone. It's now customer experience and all the touch points that happen along the way. That's where you need to implement the best technology. And this morning was different than Friday morning, right? And technology continues to move rapidly. And you need to be on top of it and to look at those things that are going to have an impact on your behalf.
I think I saw a video. It would have been maybe 15 years ago, maybe a little bit older. It was Jeff Bezos being interviewed. Might have been by Dan Rather. I'm not sure who the interviewer was, but he's
Right.
like, what's that?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, uh, so the interviewer was pestering him like, you're losing money, and what the hell are you doing? And don't you need to, get your sales up? Don't you need to do this? He says, no, every single aspect of our company is focused on one thing: the customer experience. And Dan Rother or whoever it was is like thinking he's like a nutcase. It's like that makes no sense whatsoever. So, kind of a visionary back then. How do we get to the one-click purchase? How do we get products to that customer the fastest? It was like that obsession on that one thing built this huge company. So yeah, I think customer experience was uh, a whimsical thought way back when, but now it's absolutely critical because people are judging you against your competition. It's not just you did a good job. It's like, well, compared to this company, you did a horrible job. Whereas what we're doing right now might have been acceptable 10 years ago, it certainly is not now. So that customer experience thing seems to be like spot on.
No, I couldn't agree more. And Amazon continues to be the example we can all follow in that regard. And they continue to improve what they're doing in that regard. And we need to do likewise. And most of us don't. Most of us think sales is just bringing money in the door, closing customers, and moving on to the next one. And that's not what it is at all. And those with that mindset won't be long in business. They'll be working for somebody else.
So one of the things I always thought was that sales is a subset of marketing, and marketing
No,
is all about. You don't think so?
I
Tell me
do not.
why.
I do not. Because number one, you said it right when you said it the first time, and that is nothing happens until somebody buys something, right? And
Right.
marketing is there to position and to be part of that process. It's not one or the other, it's both. Neither marketing is part of sales, neither sales is part of marketing. And when we put customer service in that, we get customer experience. Those titles, those silos need to be wiped out.
Which is easy to say but hard to do.
No, it's not.
Okay, tell me and I'll challenge you why it is.
Well, it is because we've been doing it to this point for this long, and it's always hard to change. So I can't argue that point, nor would I. But what I would say is that making that change once you get into the methodology of doing so is the easiest thing ever, because now you can get everybody working on the same page, working with the same tools, and working towards the same goal, right, with the same information. And when you create a team that's unified like that, that's the easiest thing ever.
So, excuse me for this. I apologize to the audience. I'm a doubting Thomas here. And so, give me a real world example of you executing this in a company, because that would be quite an illustration for us to really get, because that change doesn't happen overnight. So, can you think of an example of a company where you had this uh, heretic of an idea, and then you were a good salesperson, you got the leadership to buy in, but then how did they implement it, and what are the growing pains to actually make it a reality?
Right. Well, in the case of the example, it was the one we just finished. And by the way, we do that in every case, not in some cases. So this isn't a case by case scenario. This is something that's mandatory in order to be effective in today's sales world. So you do need to knock that down and have everybody have access to the same system and the same data, and by way of the tools and those results, in order to move forward in that regard. So by way of your example, again, helping those people put back and put away all their old thinking and now come together. So you don't have salespeople over here, customer service over there, and marketing people over there. They're all in the same place. They're all working on the same team, and they're all working with the same customers, right? Now, they may have some different functionality with respect to how they engage with those customers, but they're all doing basically the same element, which is to improve the customer experience. And when you make that change, the rest of it, they drive because they see it and they help each other do it.
So, Thomas, let me give you a real world example. I
Sure.
was working with this company. They've got 140 engineers in the
Right.
engineering department,
Right.
and they've got six people in the certification department. The six people in the certification department feel threatened because they're just a small little division, but
Hmm.
everything engineering does, they have to give the okay to. So, to
Right.
justify their existence, their criteria for safety was higher than the FAA's. And this was costing the company money. So, you got the CEO saying, you need to cut this shit out because this is costing us money. But yet, that human need to be relevant and hold on to power, it took them a while to sort that out. It's not just, hey, we need to play together, let's do it. That doesn't happen in the real world. So, how did you go in there? It didn't happen magically. So, were they growing pains, or did everyone just basically go, I've drunk the Kool Aid, let's do it?
Yeah, so no, we proved it in a project to begin with. So we had a test project in that case, and we proved it in that model, and then we rolled the project out across all the other areas of the business once proven. And you're right, change and more effectively said, culture is the hardest thing to change, right?
Agreed.
But when you start to bring everybody together and you stop separating people out, so on Monday we're having a marketing meeting. On Tuesday, we're having a sales meeting. And on Wednesday, we're having a customer service meeting. No, on Wednesday, we're having a customer experience meeting. And all of those elements to be going to be together, and you bring everybody together, right? And yes, certain people are going to have different skill sets to do different things, but in the same room, in the same communication and conversation with the rest of the team for the same reason, and that's customer experience.
That is brilliant. And what's kind of interesting is this, still in this day and age, you can get different departments in a company, and we can pick those three or we can pick any other. So I'll give you a good example. I was working for this catering company doing a 2-day retreat. And on the second day morning, I went to the head of sales. So, how does sales happen? What's the first step? Oh, somebody goes to our website and takes a look at our wedding catering business and they go click. Then what happens? Then the second step happens, and the third happens, and the fifth happens, and the 12th step is they come in for a tasting, and the 24th step is this, and then it was like a 50-step process. And the interesting thing was this is I was in the kitchen about 2 months later, and one of the people in the kitchen, those salespeople are a bunch of lazy, good for nothings. And the head chef goes, "No, you have no idea what they do." And the same thing is true in terms of the salespeople understanding what's happening in the other department and bringing them together, and they get a realization that it's not just, oh, customer calls up for a problem and you guys don't fix it well. Getting that understanding also creates that bond and that respect that allows them to focus on the one thing, like you said, customer experience. So it's not about me anymore in my department. It's about how do we win and create a better and better customer experience. So yeah, I love that, bringing people together
Yeah, and
and
I would only add
cutting
one thing
costs.
that's consistent with how we started this conversation, and that is technology, and more specifically AI, makes that much easier than it's ever been before.
So before we part company, Thomas, what's an AI platform that you're looking at right now, just for your education, wonderment, something that you're seeing out there that, hey, this could be something really useful in the near future? Are you experimenting with stuff that you're,
Sure. Oh,
what's
all the
what's one thing
time,
you're playing with
all the time.
that we should know
So,
about?
yeah, so One Mind, so the number one,
Yeah,
mind.com is certainly one, and there's a series of others like it, but that's the one we're really paying a lot of attention to because it does some things and has a virtual assistant and sales assistants, and that's an area that we're really looking at to further supplement and make our programs even better, and the process of engaging customers through AI back to our sales and customer experience teams even more smoother.
love it. Uh, Thomas, we're going to put all your contact information in the show notes, but why don't you do a quick way for people to get a hold of you if they're running on a treadmill right now? How do people get a hold of you?
Thomas at soar.com.
Soar with Thomas. I love that. Thomas, thanks so much for being on the program, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation.
Thank you, and thank you for the time, Umar.